Hello Internet, I'm the Disney Brain and welcome to the DCOM review. It's been a long time coming, but we're finally taking our signature closer look at the Wizards movie. 2009 was one of the most interesting years in the history of DCOMs. The movies that came out in that year were mostly underappreciated despite the quality and unique traits they all possessed. And trust me, we'll go real deep into Dadnapped soon enough. So, it should come as no surprise that in that year, the movie extension of one of Disney Channel's greatest shows became a runaway success. But, does it live up to the huge ratings it pulled in? Well, let's find out. Spoiler warning now, you all know the drill. With all that said, let's dive into Wizards of Waverly Place, the movie. We start things off with the Russo parents going out while Alex is causing all sorts of trouble that Max only adds to later, all salvaged by Justin. This will be a ton of introductions, but we'll make it through. Jerry Russo, portrayed by David DeLuce, who did the voice for Coop on Megas XLR, a hilarious and underappreciated show. Teresa Russo, portrayed by Maria Canals Barrera, who has a lot of experience being a mother on this channel. Max Russo, portrayed by JT Austin, who started off here and has since moved on to here. Justin Russo, portrayed by David Henry, who grew up completely before we ever found out who the mother was. And of course, Alex Russo, portrayed by global phenomenon Selena Gomez, who has succeeded everywhere, except maybe for dating. Whew. Alright, and Harper's here for a scene or two, but that's about it. This film's central premise doesn't really kick in until about 20 minutes, and before that, there's a bit of Alex getting into trouble and Justin trying his hardest to get her out because that's basically how the show works most of the time, but all the while building the tension between mother and daughter that would provide the catalyst for everything that happens next. I thought this was a great start because it basically gave us an episode of the show for free as a lead-in to the film itself, which only actually gets moving once the Russo family travels to the Caribbean. So once they get there, they're basically doing the whole family vacation thing, which most of you can probably relate to if you've been literally anywhere with your family, before they run into a street magician named Archie, played by Steve Valentine, who has actually played a lot of interesting DCOM characters over the years. They learn about the Stone of Dreams, one of the most powerful magical artifacts in existence, but Jerry decides it's too dangerous to even consider. So, with this vacation being nightmarish for Alex thus far, she eventually snaps after her mother grounds her and accidentally wishes that she and her dad had never met. I know what you're thinking, shouldn't that also mean that none of the three kids were ever born? Yes it would, if we're talking purely about temporal mechanics, but we're also talking about magic here. The spell makes it so that the Russo parents basically revert back to how they were before they ever met, except still in their current bodies, thus making Jerry a full wizard now. It makes sense because a spell powerful enough to erase the caster from existence by instantly changing history probably isn't one that could just be shouted out without a much more powerful wizard at the helm, and the wizard's world already established a broad idea of wizard power within its own internal system of rules. But when you throw in the timer aspect with the Russo kids forgetting things, it does become kind of an easy way out, but I don't think that based on the world that we're in, that it's overly flawed to frame this plot point in that way. And even if it was, it's easy to forgive because of how they utilize this plot point to progress the rest of the film. So, Justin, Alex, and Max eventually figure out what Alex did, and it's on them to try and fix everything now that their parents no longer remember being their parents, or married for that matter. After a couple of failed attempts to use their own magic to solve things, Alex and Justin decide to seek out Archie to help guide them to the Stone of Dreams, which can grant any wish or undo any spell. And while they do that, Max has the relatively unglamorous task of watching over their parents to ensure that they don't get themselves into trouble or do something really crazy like fall in love with other people. The Max elements are pretty fun in their own right, getting the most out of a version of Jerry Russo who's a lot more teenager-like than his usual stricter self, in addition to a version of Max that actually has to stay focused for once. I thought this was a pretty great use of character subversion by the minds behind this film, and it produces some nice moments. But I would argue that what we get from Selena and David during their adventure scenes really captures the heart and soul of not just this film alone, but Wizards of Waverly Place as a whole. But we'll talk plenty about them a little later on. So, eventually, after some funny moments and some truly beautiful moments between the brother-sister pair, they reach the Stone of Dreams, only to have it snatched by Archie's parrot. This turns the parrot back into Giselle, the woman Archie loves, which is why he wanted the stone in the first place, but he quickly learns that the feelings were not reciprocal. But without the stone, the Russo family, who is now all gathered together, is at a loss as to what to do. Their issues are then compounded when Max loses all of his memory and gets sucked into a magical time tornado? It's kind of a strange choice versus just having him slowly disappear, for example, but the moment is still a pretty emotional one. But, more importantly, time is running short, and the only way to fix everything is with the power of a full wizard. For some reason, Jerry can't do anything concrete despite being a full wizard in his current state, but we did get an early family wizarding competition, so I guess I can let that convenient detail slide. And man, was it ever a fun competition. Jerry said it wouldn't work unless they tried their hardest, and that sure wasn't an issue here. And I loved how their individual battle strategies diverged based on the characters we already know them to be. Justin was more straightforward and primarily used fire, an offensive-minded element, while Alex was more innovative with her use of both earth and water in an effort to both advance her own positioning and counter Justin. Now, since it's me, I root for Justin at every turn, but it was a well-fought bout all the same. So, Alex wins the contest, much to the dismay of Justin, and becomes a full wizard. Justin then proceeds to forget everything and get sucked away, but not before Alex delivered the film's most powerful lines. A moving and inspired piece of dialogue that speaks to what I've often called the greatest element of wizards, the bond between a brother and a sister, and what that bond means. I have a younger sibling myself, so I connected with that scene immediately, but even if you don't, Alex's words will still probably resonate with you. So Alex and Jerry are at a loss as to what to do once the full wizard powers prove ineffective until Teresa shows up. Wait, how did she get here? And how did she know to come here? Anyways, she got the Stone of Dreams back from Archie, and now Alex uses it to not bring her brothers back, but in a move of pure selflessness, brings everything back to the way it was prior to her wish. This brings us back to the scene with her and her mother fighting, but with Alex having learned her lesson. She won't be wishing her away anytime soon. And the movie ends with the family all back together with full memories, ready to take on the rest of their Caribbean vacation. And now, the characters. Archie is kind of a silly character, but he's entertaining enough given the role he needed to play. It comes off as a bit over the top at times, but it also displays the kind of range Steve Valentine has, who's played 3 different supporting characters in DCOMs, and each of them are very distinct in terms of their screen presence. Overall, I'd say his performance here falls somewhere in between Teen Beach Movie and Avalon High, with Avalon High being the best he's performed. If you're fans of the show from which this movie derives, then you pretty much know what to expect out of Jerry and Teresa Russo. I think as a pair, they're one of the better set of Disney Channel parents that capture a fine balance between good parenting moments and genuinely entertaining moments. Here they got to let loose a bit more and embrace completely different sides of their personality. It does more in the way of changing Jerry as a character, but seeing the pair play off each other, even when they don't remember being in love or married, was fairly engaging. Jerry gets to be lively and entertaining most of the time, and Teresa gets to be at the heart of the film's central conflict, and both work very well within those roles. Max Russo is a character I never really got into as far as the show goes, but I think the movie found a good place for him by allowing him to be the troll he usually is, but also balancing that with giving him some responsibilities while his older siblings do the figurative heavy lifting. Seeing him as someone who had to think on his feet to figure out ways to get his parents to at least notice each other was really fun, and it pushed him more than most Wizards episodes could. And even though getting pulled into a tornado as a means of getting erased from existence was a bit absurd, it was still a unique way to present the idea, if nothing else, and seeing it happen was a great emotional moment. Every single Russo kid had to be something more than their usual selves to resolve this movie, and Max is no exception. But this movie absolutely belongs to the dynamic duo of Justin and Alex. With Justin, we get a beautiful piece of character design because we see some personal layers peeled back to reveal a few hidden insecurities about the perfection that his family has grown accustomed to. We know from both the show and the movie that magic isn't this natural thing for him. He has to work hard at it, remain focused constantly, and study hundreds of spells and incantations. We learn that even though Justin should be supremely confident about his odds in the Family Wizard competition, he's really not. But it's a properly framed and very potent fear because we also know how talented Alex can be when she actually tries, and it scares Justin that maybe someday he'll wake up to find that all of his hours of fervent studying have all been for naught. It's the kind of thing that strikes a more powerful chord within the context of this movie's release, since many of us know that Justin ends up being just fine when it's all said and done. In fact, he basically becomes a young Dumbledore, and that's awesome. But at the end of the day, David Henry puts in an all-time great performance as Justin, pushed even further by his co-star that arguably does even better in her role. Selena Gomez kills it as Alex Russo pretty much every time she has to portray her. It really is the role she was born to play, with her natural snark, wit, and overall underrated acting abilities. She gets the comedic angles in this movie down, as expected for a character, but without the laugh tracks, it really adds more to them than a normal episode would have, in addition to more naturally capturing the dynamic she has with both her mother and Justin. Honestly, I don't really think I need to go into that much more detail about why Selena kills it here. If you've seen the movie or the show, you know exactly how she breathes life into the role of Alex. But as great as David and Selena were here as individuals, they become transcendent as a pair. The two face all manner of obstacles and challenges and threats, but they work through them all together. This film doesn't really have any issues with pacing the quicker moments, but When the pace is slowest, it's at its best, and that usually involves Justin and Alex being perfectly portrayed by their respective actors. It was always something that was hinted at during the course of the show to this point, but this movie absolutely nails what being a brother and sister means for these two characters who are designed to be polar opposites, but know how to work together for a grander goal because they genuinely love each other. I'm willing to go so far as to say that Justin and Alex might just be the greatest sibling pair that Disney Channel has ever created. Yes, even more so than some actual real-life siblings. Most of the first half of this movie is them poking fun at each other, annoying each other, basically being their normal selves when the situation isn't as dire. But when the stakes are highest and their family is in jeopardy, all of that eventually takes a back seat while the movie reveals the beautiful way that these two connect as actors, as friends, and as brother and sister. When Justin said they need each other, he meant it, because both in the context of the movie's plot and their respective acting, both of them brought out the absolute best versions of each other. And that's Wizards of Waverly Place, the movie. So, what's the verdict? I've said it before, but I think it bears repeating. I consider the Wizards movie, with Second Dimension as a very close second, to be the best example of taking an original series and properly expanding it into the realm of an original movie. The aesthetic, the emotional weight and feel, the writing, the acting, the directing, and the way the character relationships are presented and developed all make this transition from TV show to TV movie a viable one. But the overarching reason is the scale of it all. It's able to do so much more with its characters and the family dynamic thereof, not only because it's got a longer runtime to work with, but also because it makes the adventure feel grand, large, and important. That's in part due to the Stone of Dreams being a particularly powerful magical MacGuffin, but it's mostly due to the location they choose and how it diverges so greatly from the New York setting that we're used to and how it adds to the experience. When you choose to turn a TV show into a movie as they did here, you need to be able to, at the very least, cultivate a narrative that's both familiar and unique that the show itself wouldn't have the time or resources to properly convey. And through the brilliant direction of Lev El Spiro, the man who really needs more DCOMs to direct, it all comes together beautifully here. Now that's not to say that there aren't errors or lapses in logic, since no movie's perfect. It made sense that Max vanishes first because he's the youngest, but then the logic doesn't hold because Justin ends up being the next one to vanish and not the younger Alex. And most of the other flaws in this movie also involve a couple of inconsistencies with how magic is utilized. Most of that, at least for me, can be given the benefit of the doubt because magic doesn't always follow logic as we know it, but sometimes it does feel like they aren't even following their own rules. I don't think any of that is immersion shattering, but I do think that those elements, mixed in with some of the relatively convenient situations that the characters find themselves in at times, does keep this film from being a top 5 DCOM versus the top 10 status I think it stands at. But I would also argue that this movie does exponentially more right than wrong, and even within the context of the minor missteps, this movie does well to create captivating plot progression out of the more dubious elements to more than make up for them. We've dug into character-driven narratives before, but this movie is a family-driven narrative. It gets the most out of the characters by getting the most out of how they relate to each other. The mother-daughter conflict that initiates the real plot really works here because it creates a serious rift that allows Alex to be more appreciative of the people in her life. And I've talked in great detail about how the brother-sister dynamic puts this movie and this family on another level. But every single one of the Russos showed up to work for this one. They all have their moments, they all have their place in the story structure, and it all works as something that feels like Wizards, but also feels like a fresh look into their world. And all of that is well complemented by a very good script that gave the actors a lot to work with. It's not as much of a think piece as other movies we've discussed because the themes of family and the bonds thereof are front and center here, so there's not as much below the surface, but I think that's perfectly fine. Not every movie needs those elements to be high quality. This movie intelligently relied on its characters in addition to a concept designed to advance its characters, and that works here because, quite simply, the characters are great ones. But it also doesn't shortchange you on the literal and figurative movie magic. All in all, I think this movie deserves the praise and the views that it received. The highest quality DCOM of any particular year is oftentimes not the one that gets the most attention as far as viewership goes, but the Wizards movie was a beautiful exception. It's not flawless, but it works in so many ways and gets the most out of its central ideas and the way those ideas are framed and filmed. If you're a fan of the show, a fan of either David or Selena, or just want to see a great DCOM, then I can confidently recommend this film to you. And as far as I'm concerned, this movie has more than earned its place amongst the greatest DCOMs of all time. But, as I often say, the only way to know for sure is to give it a watch and decide for yourself. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this review, throw down a like, sub for more, and share the magic everywhere. And don't forget to follow the Disney Brain on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Links down below. Halloween is almost upon us, so to celebrate, we'll be jumping right from one DCOM review to another as we take a closer look at Halloweentown. And a little later on, we'll be reviewing our first Nick movie. There might be a video in between that and the Halloweentown review, but we'll see. Either way, plenty to look forward to. Until then.
This indentation here corresponds with that indentation on the cliffs over there.
Yes, but that indentation could also correspond with that indentation on the cliffs over there, mate.
Why don't we just ask someone?
Okay, I think this patch of greenery can be that.